We might kick off, Declan, and look, people will be joining as we do our introduction. So for those of you on the call, you're very welcome, and thanks for sharing where you're dialing in from in the chat. Look, we're delighted to have you guys here today for our lunchtime webinar, Understanding AI's Legal Framework and What Project Professionals Need to Know. So lots of us on the call are probably involved in project delivery in some aspect. I think this promises to be a really insightful session for anyone involved in project management, especially if your work interacts with AI or data or emerging technologies, which I guess is all of us at this stage. Before we get started, just to let you know, excuse me, today's webinar is recorded and we will be sharing a copy of the slides with all of the attendees after the event. So let's get started. And before we get into the main event, just going to do some introductions. So my name is Emma Daly. I am the Advisory and Training Practice Lead at Imagine, and I'm also a member of the AI Innovation Hub. For those of you who may not know who Imagine are, we are a business and IT project delivery consultant, and we are absolutely delighted to be sponsoring the PM AI Innovation Hub this year. Being part of the hub has been very valuable learning experience for me personally, and we'll hear a little bit more about it from Declan just in a moment. So Declan, you'll be up. And that brings me very nicely to joining me today is Declan Foster. Declan is the head of the AI Innovation Hub, and he's also a board member of the Ireland chapter of the PMI. He is a recognised industry leader in project delivery and change management, and he has been ranked among the top 10 global thought leaders in project management by Thinkers 360. So we're in very good company, Declan, with over 25 years experience. He has also co-authored an award-winning book. God, he's putting me to shame here. Humology, How to Put Humans at the Heart of Technology. But I suppose more recently, Declan, what's really applicable to today, Declan holds an honours degree in AI and has an executive diploma in AI for business from Oxford. So really pertinent to today's session. So we're delighted to have you contributing to the webinar today, Declan, and obviously very welcome. And to, I suppose, the main event, it's a real pleasure for me to introduce our main speaker, Dr. Martha Lassick-Markey. So Martha is a research fellow at the Adapt Centre in Trinity College, and she explores cutting-edge AI-driven digital content technologies. Martha, again, putting us to shame here, has a PhD and Master's in Law from Trinity and a Master's degree in Law from the University of Warsaw. So it's really clear that our academic journey really is reflecting international reach. Martha's research currently spans law, labour and technology, and she's widely published in academic journals, and she's been the recipient of the prestigious Brian Percusson Award from the European Trade Union, contributing to EU law. So we are absolutely delighted to have her with us today to share her insights. So please give a warm welcome to Dr. Martha and to Declan. So during the session today, guys, we would absolutely love to hear from you. We will monitor the Q&A function, not the chat. So we will look at the Q&A during the session, and there will be time for questions and answers towards the end of the webinar. So I'll hand over now, Declan, to you to give us some information on the AI Innovation Hub.
Thank you, Emma. That's a great introduction, and it's fantastic that we have Martha here today. I'm so looking forward to hearing her insights. I just wanted to briefly tell you a little bit about the AI Innovation Hub. And we established the AI Innovation Hub, which is part of the Ireland chapter of PMI late last year. So our vision, as you can see there in the slide, is through our work we'll empower project management professionals in Ireland to leverage AI to achieve efficiency, collaboration and impact across industries. Now, what we really want is the AI Innovation Hub to become a central hub of expertise and collaboration and thought leadership for all things AI in project management in Ireland. Now, we're going to do this by running events throughout the year, including webinars such as the one we're having today. We're also going to be running a hackathon or a solution jam coming up later in the year, and I'll talk about that at the end of the presentation. We're also going to be producing thought leadership reports and articles around the topic of AI and project management throughout the year. So we really want our members to be able to learn explore and innovate together in this really an exciting space, you know, that the intersection of AI and project management. So without further ado, I will pass over to Martha for our discussion. Thanks, Martha.
Thank you, Declan, and Emma, thank you so much for the introduction and indeed for this fantastic opportunity to speak to you here today. And so my job is really to take you through some of the main features of the EU AI Act, the recently adopted European legislation, and particularly with the focus of what might be useful to project managers. So let me take you through the agenda first for today. So I'll start with some early examples of the use of AI even before it became, you know, such a buzzword that it is at the moment. Following from that, I'll focus a little bit more detail on some of the main features of the EU AI Act. So, first of all, why the EU decided to regulate AI, especially, you know, high-risk AI, slightly in opposition to maybe other jurisdictions in the world. And then I'll explain some of the key features of the AI Act, especially, you know, with some key takeaways for project managers. So starting with some of these early examples, so you might have heard of the world chess champion Garry Kasparov, and so he might have been the world chess champion, but he was actually beaten by AI. So it was as long ago as 1997, and the AI system was called Deep Blue. And as far as I remember it, Garry Kasparov tried twice, and especially the second time he was definitely defeated by AI. Another example that you might have heard about was Compass. That was a system that was used by in the American judiciary system, where there was an algorithm that was being used to assess the risk of reoffending by offenders. And of course, it was found that it was biased against persons that had a certain racial descent. So it had to be scrapped for that reason. And then finally, the last example that was quite tragic was the so-called AI boat fire incident. It was about 5 years ago, a boat called Conception, where there was an AI system that was being employed there, but unfortunately it wasn't compliant with some of the health and safety regulations. So the boat caught fire, unfortunately killing over 30 people that were on board of that boat. So AI is definitely something that has been with us for a long time. And indeed, the term artificial intelligence was coined a long time ago, as far back as the 1950s. So what do we mean by artificial intelligence nowadays? It's a very broad term for machines doing tasks we associate with human intelligence, like reasoning, decision-making, or language. It refers to many different technologies that are designed to accomplish tasks that can otherwise be only carried out by human minds. For example, identifying patterns, recognizing images, understanding languages or solving problems. We often also hear a term called machine learning. Machine learning is also very closely linked to AI. In fact, it is an application of AI that focuses on developing computer programs that can access data and use it to learn and improve from experience. So some examples that we've been using every day, maybe without realizing is, for example, your Netflix algorithm that learns from your browsing and watching history in order to present you with recommended content. It may also be your email that classifies spam into a separate folder from the inbox in your email account, and so on. Some common use cases in project work. I'm sure you're all very familiar with it at this stage, but AI can be used for drafting progress updates, meeting summaries and stakeholder reports, extracting action items from transcripts or email chains, identifying likely project risks or blockers using historical data, patterns. So it's all these applications, such as ChatGPT, Gemini, Notebook LM, even Microsoft Copilot. And so I guess, it's important to realize that AI is already embedded in everything nearly that we're doing today. And while we might choose not to use it, we're very often being prompted to use it. Unfortunately, there are some risks associated with AI, so the machines that are learning without being programmed. So some of the key risks that have been identified include bias in training data. So that is also linked to that example of the Compass system that I have previously mentioned. So overall bias in any kind of algorithmic management. As well as that, there might be a lack of transparency. So many AI models are black boxes, so we don't fully understand how they reach decisions. So it makes it hard to explain or audit them. Automation without context might be another issue. So AI may indeed recommend actions without understanding business context or edge cases, leading to poor decisions if they're not reviewed by humans, if there is no human oversight. As well as that, and I'm sure you're probably very aware of it at this stage, there are some ethical concerns related to the use of AI, especially unintended uses of AI, which indeed can raise some very serious legal issues. And so the formal efforts to regulate AI, such as the EU AI Act, have only emerged quite recently. And so for quite some time, there had been this legislative void that had been filled with numerous codes of ethical conduct that were developed by the tech industry, aiming to gain legitimacy for its technological advances, with ethics becoming a buzzword in the corporate world of technology. Unfortunately, the sincerity of the commitment to ethics is difficult to measure, as many industry-based ethical frameworks have the character of, very high-level general principles devised and implemented by those, unfortunately, with a commercial interest in the rollout of AI. I remember reading some papers that, you know, had analyzed and counted nearly 100 different codes of ethical conduct. So as well as that, there was also a lack of you know, harmonized, I suppose, approach towards AI. And you know, even to the extent of it becoming a bit of a misconception and misappropriation of ethics without applying the very strict ethical standards that exist in that field. As well as that, another problem of those ethical codes of conduct was the lack of appropriate enforcement mechanisms, because ethics very often relies on our own I suppose, willingness to adhere to them. So ethics doesn't have teeth. And this is the reason why ethics can often be viewed as an inferior standard to the law, because of that lack of teeth precisely. Now, it's actually the opposite, because ethics is a higher moral standards than the law, which merely regulates the bare minimum. But it's really that lack of appropriate enforcement that meant that ethics was not enough when we're faced with rapid technological advances. So to summarize this first part of why do we need regulation? Well, first of all, to prevent harm, because AI can reinforce bias, make unfair decisions, or cause safety issues when misused. To ensure accountability, like I said about enforcement, and regulation always clarifies who is responsible when AI goes wrong. So, and this is something we need, even though in the current legislation it is not very clearly, unfortunately, clarified either. To promote trust, so clear rules help people and companies feel confident using AI, especially in sensitive areas like healthcare or finance. Encourage transparency, protect human rights, because laws help ensure AI doesn't undermine privacy, freedom, or fairness, or indeed some other fundamental rights that might also be involved. Create a level playing field, because regulation sets consistent expectations across regions and sectors. Now, this is true for the European Union, which has indeed recently adopted this unified legislation, but it may not be true for some other parts of the world. Which brings me swiftly to the next slide, you know, where I just want to briefly touch on some global perspectives outside Europe. So I suppose the key message here is that the European Union has really adopted the strictest approach to AI governance so far. The other parts of the world seem to have a more lenient approach so far. So in the United States of America, a couple of years ago, President Biden issued an executive order on the safe, secure, and trustworthy development and use of artificial intelligence. So there was some, I suppose, willingness to maybe not regulate, but at least introduce some oversight mechanisms for AI. And in this vein, then shortly before the last presidential election, the US signed the Council of Europe's Framework Convention on Artificial Intelligence, but of course it's all going out at the window now, as President Trump has signaled, you know, a permissive approach, and he issued a new executive order. In the UK, for a long time, The government considered that a non-statutory approach offered more flexibility to keep pace with technology. However, recently, only last month, an AI bill that had been proposed before was reintroduced into the House of Lords. So if it is enacted, it will require setting up some more oversight mechanisms and AI authority. Now, further afield, so for example, South Korea, the National Assembly has proposed a series of draft bills that intend to introduce compliance measures for high-risk AI systems. But contrary to the European logic, I suppose that the Korean approach appears to embrace preferential permission, and this approach of like allow first and regulate later. Now, moving on to the EU AI Act, which is this flagship regulation adopted by the European Union last year. The purpose of the AI Act is to categorize AI systems based on risk and set some obligations accordingly. So why is it important? If your project uses AI tools, especially in regulated sectors or handling personal data, you could be impacted by this law. To be slightly more specific, the AI Act has introduced 4 different categories of risk. So here I have this lovely pyramid. So the first category is unacceptable risk. So these are the AI applications that have been banned by the EU legislator. So these are the types of AI applications that can, manipulate behavior or involve social scoring, like, for example, especially towards vulnerable persons, like emotion recognition in schools or in the workplace, and as some other, for example, toys that would have AI applications that could manipulate children, and so on. So these are the types of AI systems that have been banned. The next major category is high-risk AI. This includes systems used in actually HR, so hiring, promotion, employee management, as well as that in the banking sector, for example, or insurance, credit scoring, medical devices, critical infrastructure, as well as that administration of justice, and border and asylum management. So there's a number of areas. So it's not so much about the system itself, but about its use. And all these areas have been listed in an annex to the AI Act. Those deploying AI in those enumerated areas must comply with very strict requirements, including risk assessments, human oversight, and a lot of reporting and transparency obligations. Then the next category is limited risk AI. So systems like chatbots, things like that, they must clearly inform users that they're interacting with AI. And these are the so-called general purpose AI models in general, such as ChatGPT, for example. And there are some transparency requirements there. And finally, the last category is minimal risk AI. So these are the more sort of automated algorithms, like everyday tools, like, you know, the spam filter in your email, things like that, where there are actually no special obligations. So I know some scholars or experts who would argue that actually it's not so much a risk pyramid, but more of a traffic light system. So you can look at it this way. So from, you know, red means just no, it's a no-go, and then moving down to the least pervasive technologies. So in terms of some, I suppose, practical advice for specifically, you know, well, project managers, but also companies, some important advice on the AI Act, if I may. So first of all, there are some key terms in the AI Act, and one of them is deployer. Because the AI Act very often refers to AI deployers when it sets out the various obligations. So who is an AI deployer? Well, unfortunately, or not, it's anyone, every natural person or an organization, whether public or private, that is using an AI system in a professional capacity. So, you know, if you're using ChatGPT at home to, I don't know, plan your next holiday, or you're looking for a recipe, that's not covered by the AI Act. But if you're using Copilot or ChatGPT or Notebook LM to draft your work emails, then you are an AI deployer, and the AI Act indeed applies to you. Now, does the AI Act apply to companies based outside the European Union? That's also a question that I've been asked before. And the answer is yes, to some extent. So it is European legislation, but any company, regardless of where it is based, that is putting an AI product or service on the EU market falls within the scope of this regulation, as was the case if you're familiar with the GDPR, where all the global tech companies such as Meta or X have to comply with the EU's data privacy regulation. So it's the same with the AI Act, and even those deploying AI in a country outside the European Union, but their AI created output will be used in the EU, are also covered by the AI Act. So you can, for example, evade the regulation by outsourcing your data to be processed in a country outside the European Union. And finally, the AI literacy requirement. So again, any company that deploys AI, and we now know that sometimes it's very hard to avoid the use of AI. So any company where the staff might be deployers of AI systems has to provide AI training for their staff. So just before I wrap up, a little bit more practical advice here. So the use of AI in HR and recruitment, like I said, this is also a high-risk application of AI. So anything to filter job applications or decisions affecting a person's promotion or termination of employment is classified as a high-risk AI application. It is in that annex to the AI Act. So the majority of the Act, with all the risk and due diligence and transparency and reporting obligations, apply to those. Equally, if your company operates in the banking or life or health insurance sectors, again, any use of AI for example, deciding on a person's mortgage application or pricing of insurance is high risk application of AI. So it's also in the annex. It also has to comply with all these requirements, and on top of that, deployers also have to carry out what's called a fundamental rights impact assessment, where you identify all the fundamental rights that are in the EU Charter of Fundamental Rights that may potentially be affected, and you also identify the potential affected stakeholders, and you also identify some measures aiming to counteract those risks. Finally, maybe on a more positive note, there are also some measures to support innovation. So innovation support is also one of the objectives of the AI Act. So these support measures, according to the EU legislation, should be made available, especially to small and medium enterprises. So, such as, for example, startups, which are developing AI products or services. And so these support measures include, for example, the so-called regulatory sandboxes, where companies may test their AI products or services in a safe way before they're put on the market. So
Brilliant.
thank you so much for...
Thank you so much, Martha. And that was a really insightful overview of the legal landscape, and nice to end on a positive there, right? Very encouraging that it's not all regulation. So Declan, you might just take us through a little bit what all this might mean in practice for project managers, because I believe there's lots of interested project managers on the webinar today.
Oh, absolutely. And thank you for those insights, Martha. So I guess, why are we considering this as project management professionals? So AI is starting to have a real big impact on the AI, on the project management community. We're starting to see AI first startups, and we're also starting to see AI functionality in a lot of the tools that we use every day, like Asana, Microsoft Project, and of course, Microsoft Copilot as well. A lot of us are starting to use that tool. So what are the sort of use cases or the areas that we're going to increasingly use AI in project management? Well, we'll cover a few of them here before we sort of get into our questions towards the end of our session today. So in planning, we can generate smarter timelines based on historical project data. And we can use that to forecast potential bottlenecks or resourcing issues before they actually surface. We can also simulate different project scenarios to help us or to support better decision making. And of course, in communication, we can auto draft project updates and emails and indeed stakeholder communications. We can use it to translate technical updates into clear summaries for perhaps our non-technical stakeholders. And And we can also, because we're all working globally nowadays, as evidenced by our session today, we can provide real-time language translation to our global teams. Also, risk management is a key factor as well. And that's where I'm seeing some teams starting to use it to surface early warning signals by detecting some anomalies in your project metrics, identifying different patterns from past projects that correlate with delays or quality issues. Decisions also in productivity. We can use it to eliminate repetitive admin tasks like status report creation or forming or formatting. We've all heard about AI agents, which is the latest buzzword, and apparently 2025 is supposed to be the year of the AI agents. So we're starting to see AI agents performing a lot of these everyday sort of administrative tasks that we have to do as project professionals. And for decision support as well, we could recommend resource shifts or a task reallocation based on workload or priority. We can also use it to provide options and not just answers when we're choosing the best course of action to take on a particular project. So that's where we're starting to use AI in project management. Now, if you're in a project management role, and I think this really applies to anybody who's involved with AI, and increasingly, particularly for technology projects, we have AI-focused technology projects that are ongoing at the moment, but increasingly, every technology project will have some component or a large component of AI involved in it, and we'll start to see that, I think, increasingly as we move forward. So as a project management professional, when you're working on a project, and indeed specifically on an AI project, ask yourself, what problem is this AI solving? Is it a real pain point, or is it just a novelty? Does it improve outcomes, reduce the time, or free up team capacity? Also start to think about what data is it trained on, because we touched on bias earlier on in our presentation. So it's important to know what is the data that we've trained our machine learning tool or a large language model tool on. Where does it come from? Does it represent our industry, our team structure, or a geographic region? So what are the limits of the tools that we're working with? And what does the AI tool do? And also specifically, what does it not do? Or where does it need human oversight? And again, could it be biased? So we always need to apply that. The AI tools that we build are just as biased as the data that we train it on, and just as biased as we are as humans as well. And so we need to consider that. And is there a human in the loop process? So is the tool really augmenting the users, the humans who are involved? So is there a human in the loop process that can override or challenge AI recommendations? And also start to think about who's accountable for the final decisions based on the AI output. Computer says no is probably never really a good answer to any AI problem. And does it comply with regulations? So we've talked before about obviously the EU AI Act is really important. We need to consider does it comply with the regulation? And then at a higher level, if you like, a more aspirational level, is it an ethical approach? Is this tool following an ethical approach to AI? And that's really where we've come to the end of our presentation, and we're going to touch on some of the questions that you've been putting into our Q&A section, and I'm going to hand back to Emma to guide us through those questions.
Thanks, Declan, and thanks, Marta. So we do have a few questions and we have a bit of time, so we'll hopefully get through them. So from Jackie, and this is probably to you, Marta, should adherence to the law be driven by the company or by the individual?
I was just looking to unmute myself. Oh, that's a really interesting question, and it's sort of deals more with the liability sort of issue, and again, like that's not something that maybe is very clearly defined in the legislation. So indeed, there was another proposal for another legislative measure in the European Union that was actually a directive on liability rules in AI, but because of the current, I suppose, climate of deregulation, then the European Commission dropped that proposal. So there are, there are some doubts over, the liability rules there, but overall, it is on the level of a company, so not so much the individuals. Now, if we are individuals acting in a professional capacity, then we are deployers as well. So this is why these AI literacy obligations are coming in. This is why all staff have to be AI literate and trained in AI. But, if there is some sort of harm caused by AI and the use of AI. So, for example, in the use of AI in HR or employee management, and there was some sort of bias that led to discrimination, based on one of the protected grounds. Well, it is the company that is ultimately, being sued if it came to that. But then again, there might be, there is also individual liability within the company. So, by providing this this AI literacy training, the companies sort of trying to, well, they will still be liable, but then they might sort of, they might also punish the employees. That's what I'm trying to say. I'm not sure if that answers your question.
Thanks, Marta. I'm sure it probably does for Jackie, but I think it just really highlights, doesn't it, what you were talking about, the importance of the AI literacy training for all staff and what that minimal quality looks like, that it's not just a tick the box exercise, which actually brings me on to the next question we have, which from Tejal, I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. He's saying, or she said, organizations sometimes use ethics and sustainability just for the sake of marketing. So this is kind of like your ethics washing. What can be done for them, and how can we make ethics beneficial at the same time truly practiced? So maybe not ethics washing.
Yes, so that's a really, really interesting question. I think it's important to stress that by actually regulating AI, we're not getting rid of ethics. So the AI Act is merely the minimum standard. And in fact, even the AI Act makes provision for companies to adopt voluntary codes of conduct. But in terms of how to make them more meaningful, well, yeah, that's a more complex discussion, because, well, ethics is really, a standard that depends on our own conscience and our own willingness to adhere to ethics. So there are various ethical frameworks, from utilitarian to virtue ethics, and these indeed might actually produce different outcomes in terms of ethical principles. So yes, I think definitely there's scope for applying ethics in a meaningful way, but maybe actually having adopted the legislation has sort of made more space for ethics to truly shine now. So it's the extra that we can do on top of what the law tells us to do.
Brilliant. And there's a
I'll
question
jump
that
in there,
follows
Emma,
on.
as well.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, I
Yeah,
was going to
excellent.
just to
Yeah,
add a slight bit to that.
yeah.
I've seen some sort of research that actually showed that, you know, having an ethical approach, whether to its AI or technology or even broader, it actually can be a competitive advantage for businesses. Because I think particularly increasingly with younger generations, they're looking to work for purpose-led organizations, and they're also looking to purchase, you know, from companies that are purpose-led. So it can be a competitive advantage as well. So I think, you know, for example, all things being equal, people will actually choose the most ethical product out there. Now, if your ethical product costs 100 times more than the one that isn't, that's a different sort of problem. But, you know, all things being equal, people will tend to choose the most purpose-led or ethical solution that they can find.
Brilliant. Yeah. And there was a question here about ethics, AI ethics audits becoming kind of a mandatory part of the life cycle for a project manager. Is that something that you would envision? That it's, I suppose, like we build in security checks, you know, information security in our projects, will ethics become part of that as well? I don't know if that's to Declan or Marta, who's most.
Marta, do you want to start that
placed.
then, or throw it to me if you like?
Well, I'm actually not really a practitioner, but so yeah, I don't know. Actually, maybe Declan, would you like to take this question?
Yeah, no, I haven't seen that happening yet, you know, a full disclosure, but I can see it start to increasingly happen. You know, we have all, certainly on the larger projects that I've been involved in, it's always been useful to bring in some maybe external folks to do a sort of quality and insurance review. And I think that we'll start to see that there'll be a stamp of approval, maybe, that we need to bring in some external consultants to give us an objective view of our approach to AI on particular technology projects. And as I said before, most projects, technology projects going forward, will have at least some component of AI in it. So yeah, I think it'll be increasingly a part of our role as project managers, but I haven't seen a lot of it to date.
Super. I think we've time maybe for one or two more questions, Declan.
I think so, yes, yeah.
This is
Yes,
probably a
absolutely.
tricky one now, so I don't know with the changing state of the world today. So from Dennis, would the US and China get a competitive advantage for their AI solutions due to softer regulations?
Well,
And is
yeah,
that a
that's a
concern?
tricky question indeed. So I did tell you about the so-called Brussels effect, so where European legislation affects other jurisdiction. But what we're seeing now is a bit of a, as I would call, reverse Brussels effect. So this move towards deregulation, and even that's affecting the European Union as well. This is why these other measures that have been proposed were now abandoned. But I actually don't know if it's going to give America or China competitive advantage. I'm sure. Well, maybe in some areas, yes, but we have to remember that any company that is targeting the European market, regardless of where it's based, will still have to comply with the European legislation. And we've seen that in action already in other areas of digital regulation. You remember when President Trump, or actually not President Trump, but Meta and Elon Musk, they have recently announced that they were going to get rid of all these fact checking on Facebook and things like that. But actually, that doesn't apply in the European Union because of the Digital Services Act. That's another piece of legislation that regulates all these tech companies. So yes, it might give them some competitive advantage, but not if they aim to engage with European users.
Brilliant. Thanks, Marta. We've got time for one final question. I think it's a very interesting question and probably something close to your heart, Declan. Knowing today's AI will be the worst we'll ever use, What should project managers be optimistic about, and what must they be cautiously vigilant about?
That's a fantastic question, isn't it? Well, I think first of all, and it goes back to the basic education that AI deployers need to have, that Martha was talking about. So as project management professionals, we really sort of have to grab the bull by the horns, I think, and be at the forefront of AI adoption. And that means educating yourself about and keeping abreast of all the changes that are happening in AI. And that, you know, the technology, the use cases, absolutely the ethical and regulation frameworks. But I also really see the positive aspects of how AI is going to impact us, and you can see that more and more. It's, you know, when we have tools that can take away some of our administrative burden, what that should do, and I underline should, is it should free up time for us, you know, to focus on developing our teams, you know, mentoring our team members, doing things like, which is increasingly important if you're in a permanent role in an organization, in a project management capacity, building up those relationships within the organization as well. But it doesn't always happen that way, unfortunately. When technology frees us up to do things, we don't always then automatically turn to the value-adding activities, which hopefully we will with AI. What do you think, Martha?
I agree. Absolutely. So it's a very interesting question. You know, knowing that today's AI will be the worst we'll ever use. So, and I think that's why the risk-based approach is quite appropriate in this context. So, you know, actually this sort of a regulatory approach, if you like, comes from the consumer law. And, you know, we might always laugh when we get a coffee or Starbucks coffee and the cup says, be careful because the content of this cup is hot. And that's obviously to prevent liability and things like that. But it is also this risk-based approach, and that's what the EU legislature has replicated when it regulated AI. And so I think this cautious approach is probably a good idea.
Brilliant. Thanks both, and thanks everyone for the really good questions. So look, we would obviously love to get your feedback on the session today. We want to make these sessions as engaging and interesting for everyone attending as possible. So you can scan the QR code there, and I'm just going to put the link in the chat as well. So you'll be able to click on the link, it'll bring you, and you can give your feedback on today's session. We're going to finish up now in one moment, but Declan has just a little bit more information on the Innovation Hub and our next event.
Thank you, Emma. And as I mentioned earlier on, we're running several events as part of the AI Innovation Hub, which is part of the Ireland chapter of PMI. And our next event, which is coming up in June, is our hackathon, or our Innovation Hub Solution Jam. And this is our tagline is innovate with AI in project management, whether you plan, prototype or build. So what we're doing is we're bringing together about 50 to 60 project management professionals for a day, and we're going to learn together what is the impact of AI in project management. We're actually going to divide people into teams, and we're going to compete and pitch at the end of the day. And each team will take an approach to how AI is impacting project management, or how we would use AI in project management. And that's where we look at a typical problem that you have as a project manager, or that you're aware of and that you've seen in project environments. And then we'll say, how could we apply AI to address that problem? And this is where our tagline is really important: plan, prototype or build. So it's not a techie or developer hackathon. So each team will be free to develop the solution or focus their attention for the day on what they feel is important. So yes, we may have teams who will actually, you know, develop a custom GPT or develop a machine learning solution on the day. We'll have other teams who will actually say, we want to maybe builds an AI ethical, and this is just an example, an AI ethical framework for project managers. And what they might do is then say, well, how would we do that? We won't build it today, but let's build the project brief and the project plan and the business case for that. And that's what we'll present at the end of the day. And that's why I guess why we're following the type of, although it's not a technical or developer hackathon, we're following that approach. So at the end of the day, each team will pitch to a panel of judges and tell them or show them what they've developed or present their business case for their AI project. And we'll actually have a winner. So we'll nominate a winning team. So there'll be more information on that solution jam on our website in the coming weeks. And I think somebody's popping in our website address into the chat at the moment. And also our contact email address. Dennis, I think you have that there. So we can pop that in. So listen, reach out to us if you're interested in attending that, but also look at our website for more details about this really exciting event. And I'll hand back to Emma to finish off. Thanks, everyone.
Brilliant. Thanks, Declan. And just to reiterate our thanks to Dr. Marta and to Declan for contributing today. It's been fantastic. Just for reference, guys, I think some of you are asking, there's a PDU code in the chat. Anyone who will know what the PDU code is, anyone that needs it. So that's just to claim the code for today's session of the PMI if you're using it to maintain your credentials like the PMP, etc. So it's there available. Mariana has shared it there. So look, well done and to the guys, and thanks everyone for attending today. We will circulate the slides from the session and keep an eye on the PMI chapter then for more events in the future. So thank you, everyone.